Three, two, one, liftoff.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.
Mr. Jonathan Miller, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And your time is impeccable because I believe July 27th was the historic congressional hearing on addressing the FDA's inaction on hemp and CBD products. So before we dive into your testimony and the outcome of that hearing, Jonathan, I'd first like to kind of just set the stage for maybe those listening that aren't aware of the history of where we've come with hemp-derived cannabis, or excuse me, CBD products. I know that in 2018, the Farm Bill was passed. So why don't you just briefly walk us through when that legislation was passed, what commitments the FDA put forward in terms of regulation, and kind of where we've settled in the years since?
Sure. So the 2018 Farm Bill passed in December of 2018, and it, for the very first time, explicitly legalized hemp, but also legalized hemp derivatives, extracts, and cannabinoids. And those are three words that all describe CBD as well as a number of other compounds. There was tremendous excitement and tremendous growth. So we had a real gold rush or green rush when it came to hemp, and about 90% of all hemp that was grown during that period was for CBD. Now, it's not the case now. It's not always going to be the case. There's so many other applications for hemp, but CBD is the easiest to market, the least expensive infrastructure, and it has the greatest amount of popular support. Unfortunately, the same day the Farm Bill was signed, the commissioner of the FDA said that it was their position that it was still illegal, that CBD could not be sold as an ingestible product. However, they were going to go through a process of examination and research to figure out the right regulatory pathway for CBD. In the meantime, that lack of regulation has cast a cloud over the industry. There weren't any enforcement actions other than warning letters sent to companies that make outrageous medical claims like CBD is going to cure cancer, it's going to cure COVID. But there was a cloud cast over the industry, and a lot of big box stores refused to carry the products. A lot of big food and beverage companies delayed plans to add CBD to their mixes, and so what we saw was a tremendous collapse in prices of hemp and CBD, and farmers were the ones that were left holding the bag with the most disruption to their industry. We have been pushing the FDA since then to get its act together and to regulate CBD, but they've continued to delay, and even in January basically said we are going to say that it's up to Congress now, that it is no longer our responsibility. We need Congress to pass legislation to regulate CBD. So it's now in Congress's hand, and as you mentioned before, we had our first hearing, a historic hearing on hemp and CBD, and happy to talk more about that at your leisure.
Yeah. I mean, I think I heard during the hearing, 54,000 acres in the United States is utilized for hemp farming. So to your point of the farmers really taking the brunt of that knee-jerk decision by the FDA, has really hamstrung the industry. So what is Congress's position now that the FDA has kind of kicked the can over to them and said that it's on Congress to regulate?
Well, so Congress is now getting engaged. And so the hearing was the first example where the House Oversight Committee, which is typically a very partisan committee. This is a committee where Hunter Biden is being bandied about. But they, in a bipartisan way, held hearings to address this issue. There was some disagreement on whose fault it is. The Republicans said the fault was FDA's. The the Democrats said it was Congress's fault. We agree with both of them. um, but they all agreed that something needed to be done and that regulations needed to be had. What was even better about the hearing is an hour after the hearing ended, and this timing was very intentional, the two legislative committees that have oversight over FDA, this is the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the Senate Health Committee, sent out a request for information asking people across the country, asking the public to weigh in on what the CBD regulation should look like. And so the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, my organization, is going through the process of answering the RFI, but so are dozens of other organizations. And so we encourage folks to take a look at that. If they've got any input, to please share it.
Yeah, I saw on the U.S. Hemp Roundtable's website that y'all are accepting input for the RFI. So that's great. And what's incredible about this whole thing, and I think you can agree, is that we're in a position really as an industry where we're begging the federal government to regulate, right? Because, I mean, as we know, especially myself living in Dallas, Texas being a prohibitive state for THC products, the emergence of synthesized cannabinoids like Delta-8 and other things that go untested and unregulated are kind of hitting the market, right? So I would imagine that in that RFI process that there's a lot of input because, you know, operators have lived with this pain for, I mean, since 2018.
Yeah, no, it's we've gotten these markets open up for products that are intoxicating. There are a lot of CBD products out there that say they're CBD, they don't have CBD in them, or might have heavy metals or contaminants. And so it's just so important to regulate. And I concluded my testimony with a plea to Congress. I said, you know, we're one of the few organizations, one of the few industries out there saying, Congress, please regulate us. We're begging you. And they listened. And so we're really feeling confident that there will be regulation at some time in the next several months.
That's really good. I mean, several months. Wow, that's pretty quick. What let's kind of recap your testimony. I know that it's available on the US Hemp Roundtable's website, but do you kind of want to summarize what you spoke about in your testimony and maybe some other snippets from others who testified on the panel?
Sure. And our website is hempsupporter.com for anybody that's looking for all this information. It's at www.hempsupporter.com. But, you know, my focus was twofold. Number one, on the real challenges to farmers and economically that the burdens that have been created by the lack of regulation and showing the collapse of prices and the hardships that farmers and small businesses are facing. But I also talked about the lack of regulation and how these products are out there that are, you know, buyer beware and that people can't trust what's in them. And we had Rayetta Henderson, who is a toxologist, testify, and she testified to the safety of CBD. Now, there are a lot of products out there unregulated that might be unsafe, but it's not because of the CBD. The CBD, as she shared with studies that she's done and other folks have done, is a very safe product in quantities that you find typically on the shelf. There was a law enforcement agent, Rich Badaracco, who's a former DEA agent, who talked about the challenges law enforcement is facing with these unregulated products in the marketplace. And then Julian Schreier from CANRA, the Cannabis Regulators Association, talked about the challenges state regulators are having, stepping into the breach, trying to address these problems and meeting federal guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, let's talk about what you just kind of mentioned earlier when you said, you know, that in the next couple of months we could see new regulatory pathway. So what gives you that indication? I mean, was there movement after the hearing where you really see some promise? And again, who's going to lead that charge? Is it Congress that's now taking this on, or is it a collaboration between the FDA and Congress?
I think it's Congress, but so the first step was this request for information, the RFI, and it's due on August 18th, which means that they want this quickly so that they can start drafting legislative language this fall. That's what's so encouraging, and so generally legislation, if you grew up on Schoolhouse Rock like I did, you might think that there's a bill that's going to go through both halls of Congress, through committees, and get on the president's desk. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going to agree to some language, and then that will be attached to a must-pass piece of legislation, which we know government needs to pass in order for things to operate. The most likely suspect for that is the 2023 Farm Bill. And so we've seen progress happen with the 2014 Farm Bill and the 2018 Farm Bill. And so by natural extension, the 2023 Farm Bill could be the best opportunity for us to get legislation passed. Now, that expires September 30th. We know there's going to be extension to at least December. It might actually be the 2024 Farm Bill, but regardless, sometime in the next 6-7 months, that Farm Bill has to pass, and we're very hopeful that CBD regulation will be on it.
So time is basically on our side at this point. I mean, it's just good timing with the 2023 Farm Bill coming out. And that, this is our year. And that legislation, do you envision like CBD products to be designated as dietary supplement? I mean, what is the path forward in terms of effectively regulating these products?
Yeah, we'd like to see CBD regulated as dietary supplements and food and beverage additives, and that has been our goal from the beginning. And it makes perfect sense to use existing regulations. So, frankly, the FDA doesn't need to do anything to be able to do it. And the FDA has said, no, we need new authority. We're happy to provide additional authorities on top of the dietary supplement and food and beverage platform. So, if they want childproof caps, well, we support that. If they want reasonable milligram limits, we'll be supportive. But these are the kinds of things that I'm hopeful will be negotiated over the next few months.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great segue, because I was going to ask you. I'm sure that there was the opposition that was testifying as well. So, what are some of their points that they're making in terms of opposing regulation around CBD products?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no opposition. The only challenge is, how do we do this? And some people don't like the dietary supplement or food and beverage lanes and would like to see a new regulatory framework, again, which we're not opposed to unless it's something that's going to take years to develop. A lot of people think that the FDA is trying to do this to be able to get tens of millions of dollars for a new cannabis center to address these things. And again, we're not opposed to a cannabis center. We just don't want this to delay things another few years. This needs to happen now.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that the industry is open to, adhering to whatever legislation is included, right? In any provisions. So like whatever the dosage is, or even packaging for children. So, but having said that, is there any concern of like the federal government overstepping in regulation where it almost hurts farmers and industries to get these products produced? I'll give you an example. We know California has tons of regulations and so many different tests and things that they need to go to for their THC products. So, which has really hamstrung the industry. Do you foresee them maybe overstepping in a way that inhibits our ability to get this momentum moving, or is there balance?
There's no doubt of concern, but we're hopeful that through these negotiations that we're having with Congress right now, and the FDA is on the other side, that we'll come up with something that's balanced and will prove to be workable for the industry.
Well, and for those that aren't on Capitol Hill and understand that process, what does that look like? So is it an iteration of back and forth where, these elected officials, Congress is meeting with industry operators and hearing their feedback and then making these tweaks in the legislation? Is it kind of a back and forth process? Are they receptive? Are they open to it?
So right now, they put out this RFI, and the RFI is asking these companies or asking the public to weigh in, and then what you will see is the legislative staff will draft up something based on the input they've received, and then we'll read those drafts, and the FDA will read those drafts, and we'll give our input, and hopefully then we'll get a solution that maybe we're not all 100% happy with, but something that we can live with.
Right. And because hemp is legal nationwide, I mean, has this been a group effort in terms of operators representing every state, or have there been a handful of states and companies that you're working with? I mean, what does the coalition look like?
Well, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable is, a membership organization. We've got about 100 different companies and organizations represent the whole spectrum of hemp products and all across the country. And so we're really united to this regulation.
Why are you passionate about this, Jonathan? Like how long have you been fighting this fight, and why are you fighting this fight?
Well, I kind of entered this whole thing accidentally. When I got out of politics, I'm a recovering politician. When I got out of politics, I decided that I was going to write a bunch of issues that I cared about, and there was this guy in Kentucky named Gatewood Galbraith who run for every office in Kentucky, probably 20 times, lost them all. But he was always the smartest guy, one of the smartest guys, one of the funniest guys. And his big issue was cannabis reform. And when he died, I looked at that and I realized that he was right about the need for legalization. And also, I learned about how important the crop was to the 18th and 19th century economies, and particularly in my home state of Kentucky. And so I began to understand why this was such a need. And since then, this has become my life. I am, we got this industry off to a good start, and then these FDA issues have been a real challenge. And so I'm really hopeful that we can get this back on the right foot for our farmers and for our businesses.
Mm-hmm. And in that process of discovery, I mean, I'm sure that outside of even the medicinal use, right, that we know where, it can help children with epilepsy and other ailments, the environmental and industrial benefits of hemp are massive, right?
And that's what really got me into this. I'm a tree hugger. I started in politics working for Al Gore, and climate change is a big passion of mine. And hemp is such a great component of climate change remediation. Hemp remediates the soil from carbon. It uses a lot less water than other similar crops, and hemp products are biodegradable and much better for sustainability purposes. So I see the long run to be really one where hemp is really working to help our goals for the planet. But right now, we need to be able to address these regulatory issues so that we can get the industry back on the right start.
Right. Yeah, we definitely need to, crawl, walk, run. But I mean, eventually the end goal, I mean, there's just so many applications when you talk about plastics, houses. You mentioned the environmental benefit. I think I heard a stat, and I don't know if this is completely true, but hemp may be the plant in the entire kingdom that takes in the most CO2 emissions of any plant, right? Like it enriches the soil, like you said. So if you ever want to grow an organic garden, plant hemp first, right?
Exactly. I mean, it really is part of the climate change solution, and we just need to start being able to develop the infrastructure better for it. And the getting regulations squared away is the first step.
Right. Do you yourself take any CBD products?
Yeah, well, I do. I take them occasionally. My wife takes them daily and swears by them. And we've got my grand dog is a consumer. So
the whole family.
We're big fans.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk. I know you briefly meant to mention it. Let's talk next steps. So you mentioned the RFI. I think the deadline to submit for that RFI is August 18th on the website that you mentioned. And then from there, they're going to take that input and then they're going to schedule another hearing. Is that right? To kind of review the input and what does the next steps look like in that process?
I don't know. I don't know if there'll be a hearing, but certainly their staffs will get together to start discussing, what the next steps are and developing legislation and be shared, with groups like ours, and then we're hopeful that there'll be a bill that will be introduced, and maybe there'll be a hearing on that bill, but that's something that will happen in the coming months.
And so if you could pull out your magic wand and flick it around and it's Jonathan Miller's perfect world, where do we land in that process?
Well, in my perfect world, Congress will tell the FDA they need to regulate these products like dietary supplements and food and beverage additives and to quit mutzing around with other stuff. But I'm realistic, and I will welcome additional regulations that are reasonable and that the FDA comes up with, and we just need to get them to the table to start making those recommendations.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, Jonathan, I know that you're a very busy man. I appreciate you agreeing to come on and just share, your experience at the milestone, congressional hearing that you were a part of. And, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? Maybe, thoughts on, anything really. Floor is yours.
Just come to hempsupporter.com if you have any interest in hemp and CBD. We have tremendous resources when it comes to, what's going out there, what are the laws and regulations in various states, and what we're doing to combat that. We also just started a new Hemp Supporter Plus program for folks that want to be part of the solution and get engaged on key issues and get access to insider information. So just come to hempsupporter.com, tool around a little bit, and join us if you can.
You heard it from Mr. Miller first. Sir, appreciate your time. Thanks again for coming on. And as this, continues to evolve and the industry matures, I'd love to have you back on to kind of see where we've landed, past the hearing. Hopefully legislation has been drafted, it's been proposed, and the ball is rolling.
Come back anytime. Thanks for talking about these important issues.
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.